in the business sector, in different sectors, who are struggling with what perhaps we have answers for?
Oh, thank you for that. Appreciate the question. To tell you the truth, if anything has kept me busy physically, it's the fact that we've had to handle the logistics so that other people don't get exposed to the virus. That's been that's been one of the reasons. So, for instance, I'm zooming in from my house now, but I did most of the services from my house like Pastor did. So I had to limit the number of people who could come here. I have an old mother. So I had to make sure that everything we needed to do was done by a very limited crew, just one person with me. So that made my workload go up. But if I want to answer your question a little bit differently, your pastor and I think I started streaming two years before, a year before your church started. I've done a few e-commerce conferences. I began to warn people here back in the city that we're behind getting online. You know what I mean? As a matter of fact, a year ago, I had a program called The Future of Education, and we kept trying to tell the teachers that education has changed, you know, the way they're going about it. And, you know, I was streaming, I was doing programs online. So for me, they weren't new, if you understand what I mean in that sense of the word. But what I found out is what you said, what you said earlier, when you said, what should we be doing? I like the scripture that I've hung on to. It's the one that says, the men of Issachar who had an understanding of the times and the seasons and knew what Israel ought to do. So for me, that's really where I'm at. I don't know what to do, but I'm standing on that scripture. And it's been very helpful in the sense that I'm learning a few things that I would never have learned if it wasn't for this situation that has defiled, some people has defiled all kind of logic. Nobody ever thought we would be here. Nobody thought this would ever happen. We didn't see it coming. It hit us, we were all blindsided. But the rest we had was God wasn't blindsided. And so when I began to look at that scripture about what Israel ought to do, that was the thing I kept asking God for, that, look, you know, give me understanding of these times, give me understanding of this time, so that I will know what I ought to do. I'm still not where I can say I'm comfortable about it, but I stumbled on one of your British authors, N.T. Wright, and he just published a book about God and the pandemic. I want to strongly recommend it to you. It's called God and the Pandemic. And he interestingly zooms in on a prayer point called Lamentations. And he spoke about the fact that when people in the Bible were troubled by situations, they went before God and began to lament. The book of Lamentations itself, as a matter of fact, 40% of all the Psalms are lamentations. Every single prophet, including Jesus, lamented. Remember when he said, my God, my God, why have you forsaken me? That was a lamentation taken from Psalm 22. So I found out that these people were lamenting. They were identifying with the problems. They were crying out before God. And out of it came hope. In the middle of Lamentations, you find it's because of the Lord's mercies that were not consumed. In the middle of Lamentation. You know, great is thy faithfulness. So for me, and I had actually stumbled on another, you have this guy, he's also, I think he's British, Irish, U2, the band. And the author of The Message translation, he died a year or so ago. They both met on a video. I'll try and share the link with my sister and she'll be able to get it to you. They had a meeting at, they met, the U2 had been reading the Message Bible and wanted to meet the author. So they arranged for a meeting in America. And they both sat down together. And one of the things they said was, there's a lot of dishonesty in our Christian songs. We don't talk about problems. We don't talk about a wife struggling with her marriage. We don't talk about the struggles we're going through, because we've all been programmed to always have to say the right thing. Pastors wanted to say, oh, they understood what was happening. It was the return of the Lord. God was judging people, or he wanted us to preach the gospel. Now, if you didn't preach the gospel when situations were good, are you going to preach it now? And things like that. So it just began to open, I don't know if you get my point. It began to open aspects, and it just made the whole thing different. And I finally began to understand that there were parts of God I never wanted to explore. Now, one of them was lamentation, crying before God and saying, I don't understand what's going on. You know, it's tough. You know, why have you allowed the enemy to take over? Why are you allowing this plague to spread like this? Why are people dying? Those were things I didn't have the courage to do publicly before I even talk about. I probably cry in my closet or something like that. But I found out that every time I opened myself up and I allowed myself to express if I said what I'm saying outside my prayer closet and my fellowship with God or in a prayer setting, that would be complaining. But when it's with God and me, it became a lamentation. And it became an access for God. Because if you read Hosea kept complaining Habakkuk kept complaining to God about the situation. And God kept replying Habakkuk in ways Habakkuk didn't want he didn't like the answers he was getting. And he got to an extent where he resorted to something as simple as, even if this thing doesn't happen, I will still praise God. I don't know if you get the point I'm making. That's what I've gotten out of this journey. It's more of, because he's not surprised. He's not, this happens, they say this happens 100-year cycles and things like that. Well, we won't be here for the next one. If it happens again, thank God. But having said that, who knows whether we're in the kingdom for such a time as this?
Thank you very much for
Thank
that.
You,
do you have any further question, Dr. Hayo?
No, sir. I was just saying thank you.
I hope
Okay.
It makes some sense in the sense of we're still on a journey. So there's no end to this thing really until we leave here. So we're going to be looking back at these stories with our children. Yeah.
Can I just add then? So the sense I get is, because you said about a lot of dishonesty in the church, right?
Yeah.
So essentially, but you've also talked about vulnerabilities, being vulnerable before God, and also being sincere to yourself about the extent of what you know and do not know about everything that's going on. Can we kind of apply that in the context of how we are dealing with it as families or as individuals? Because, for instance, in the United Kingdom, we've had a lot of families suffering. I don't know what it's been like in Nigeria, but I mean, they are tracking statistics, and we are seeing families are disintegrating, domestic violence is rising, abuse against children, depression, and everyone is linking this back to what is happening. And perhaps it's because we are not bringing ourselves to a position that we do not have all the answers, or that we are not in control, because it seems like control has been ripped away from us. And people are struggling to come to terms with, oh no, I thought I had everything figured out. I thought I had everything all planned out. And now it seems like I don't even know what to do. So could that be one of the reasons why we're having all this spike in divorces, family problems, businesses crashing? Obviously, we know that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've had domestic violence here gone crazy during the COVID-19. It's very bad now. Of course, there's a lot of, thank God for social media, there's a lot of campaign against it as well. but there's a lot of domestic violence issues that some men who had never stayed at home for months are finally staying at home, and new kind of challenges have come up. Yes, you're absolutely right. Control has been yanked away from us, and that's what is causing most of this thing. I remember I had Reverend Tunde Amosu on one of my church services interviewing him, and I said to him that in some marriages, for instance, right now, take that of, there was an arranged marriage of Martin Luther to a nun. I don't know if many of you know the story. Martin Luther was, you all know Martin Luther, the famous Reformation guy, who was excommunicated more or less or driven out of the church circle. And then he decided it was time for him to get married. So they arranged some sort of a marriage with him with one sister who also left the nun. And he said he learned more in marriage than he learned in all the years he spent in the monastery. Because people originally were criticizing him that the reason why he left and got married was because he had sexual problems he couldn't deal with. And he said, no, in marriage, you had to learn new things. You had to learn the art of negotiation, of living, of working things out, making things work. And their marriage worked, really. They started schools in Germany and so on and so forth. But having said that, what I was trying to get across to people was, in this COVID-19, your husband may be the weak person and you the strong person. And in this COVID-19, your wife may be the weak person and you be the strong person, which is why I closed my last statement with, who knows whether you are in the kingdom for such a time as this. You see, the challenge we have all the time is that we expect everybody to have the same response we will have to crisis. Pastor Ito Godalo's wife died a few weeks ago. And on the morning that his wife died, after he got the news, he climbed on the podium and went to preach at the funeral. I mean, the whole nation was stunned, And he said, listen, I have to do my work. There's nothing I can do to bring her back. I'm going to do my job. Some other person would have crashed. I don't know if you get the way, you're just completely not being able to talk or do anything. We have to understand each other, to understand that somebody right now may be super weak, you know what I mean, because of the COVID-19. And then somebody else is very, very strong and very bold. And he, takes chances. But we just it's like we don't look at marriage as a vehicle where let's make it work. If your car is bad, you take it to the mechanic, you fix it. In marriage, we rather apportion blame. You know what I mean? And say, oh, he's not supplying, he's not paying, and things like that. So for me, that's one of the biggest lessons I learned, because my wife works with the central bank. And if there's any organization that, if they stop paying, I'll leave the country, and that's central bank. So for one thing I was sure of was that for the period that my wife was working for central bank, at least we won't starve in my house. I don't know if you get the point I'm making. But other people don't, I had to lean on my wife for the 4 months or the 3 months of, you know what I mean? I had zero income. If you understand what I mean, my business was shut down because I run an event center. All my programs are event-based, and that was completely banned. Now, for us, because we've had ups and downs, financially over the years, we've known how to complement each other. And so this was just a bigger sin, but it was still contained within an understanding that we had. But I'm saying if we had not learned how to weather that kind of storm earlier on, it could have really thrown a big spanner into our relationship. But for 4 months, you couldn't even put anything on the table. So you're absolutely right that it's bringing out the worst, but it's also bringing out the best in us. Some people are doing amazing things. So some guys here pivoted from making fashion clothes to giving out face masks. They've almost hit 100,000 face masks they've given out. And they managed to even break even, helping out and building, making face masks for other companies. Some people have been very daring in the way they've handled emergencies. Some governors have been outstanding. Some have lied and not kept, you know what I mean? But this is what leadership is all about. It shows up in crisis. It helps you to know who you really are. And if you're not strong, well, try to strengthen yourself. If you're strong, don't lean on your oars. keep building yourself up, because the next one can blindside you as well. So it's, for me, it's just that journey, that up and down thing. You know, but that fact that control has been ripped away from us is forcing us to go back to the person who truly has control, and that's God. You know, and leaning on him as best as we can. And it's hard. If anybody says it's easy, it's not, they're not telling you the truth. It's extremely hard, you know, but it's the only way. And we even have a hope. What about those who don't have a hope? Who don't even, you know, I tell people all the time, if a Christian dies now, he goes to heaven. If an unbeliever dies now, he goes to hell. This is the heaven for an unbeliever. And can you imagine this kind of heaven? So we are supposed to be in a better place, you know, in the sense of we're supposed to be able to take advantage of what we have. And that's another lesson I'm learning, that there's so much more I'm capable of doing in God than I am capable of doing outside him.
Thank you very much for that. So please, let's keep the questions coming. It's open. Any question really under heaven. Thank you, Pastor Francis, for being very open and also quite vulnerable, you know, sharing from your own challenges too, currently. Yeah, like I said, there are different expressions here on this platform. So Pastor Francis also wrote a book. I'm not saying it because Pastor Francis is here, but I have read books about relationships and about marriage. His book on marriage, A Streetcar, is it called Marriage or Named Marriage?
Named Marriage.
Is I will highly recommend that. So if you want to ask any question in that regard, please let us feel free to ask. I know last week, those of us who were here, we looked at different challenges and also opportunities, especially for those who probably are just leaving school now. Pastor Francis, we have some people here who are just graduating. What next for them? What would you advise for such
they just
people?
graduated.
Yeah, just graduated into a pandemic. So, what would you say to such people? Baba Shola, I know you have a question from the look on your face, so don't let me obstruct your question. Maybe Pastor Francis will come back to that.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, sir. My question. I'm fine, thank you, sir. My question is relating to leadership. As someone that leads, a church and probably leads in the business world, because it's easy for people that work for people to say, "Oh, I got redundant," and seeing it from your own perspective. I want to understand from a leader's perspective, what are the difficulties that you face? I'm sure it must be difficult to tell somebody your job is over, company is closing down, and even in the church environment, you probably have staffs that probably can't do the job they used to do because it used to be face-to-face or you have human interaction, and now technology is doing that. What can we, what have we learned, or what can you give us as a leader to say, okay, as aspiring leaders in the future, how do you handle such turmoil and things in the future? I don't know if my question is clear enough.
Well, it's clear in a sense that I have not had to fire anybody, which for me is a good thing. Although I had to cut their salaries down for the period that they didn't work, I didn't have to do that. I didn't have the heart to do it. And I'm also worried that if we don't behave ourselves and there's a second lockdown, then I'd have no choice, but to really shut down, and that's what I'm campaigning about. Like, guys, we've got to behave ourselves. We've got to wear those masks. We've got to keep to the social distancing rules. We've got to do our own part. In Ibadan here where I live, there's still 3 people on a motorbike without masks. I'm telling you that's happening right now. And it's happening today as I'm speaking to you now. You'll see people on motorbikes, 3 of them, without masks, just having a jolly time. You go to the market, there's no social distancing. People are still shouting, come and buy this, and spitting into other people's faces. It's happening here. It's a miracle. And I say that with every confidence. It's a miracle this plague didn't destroy our country, because we just didn't keep to any kind of rules here. And it's always the weakest link, if you understand what I mean. I've been following social distancing in my church, in my facility. As a matter of fact, I developed special documentation and special ways of doing things, which I shared even with the state government here. And they kind of liked it. Then immediately I finished the program in my church, I was invited to somebody's 60th birthday. And I get into his 60th birthday and I found out the room is so small, there's no social distancing and people are not keeping their masks on. And I'm like, why did I do all that work? You know what I mean? Only to come here to expose myself. And that's because we live in a society here where the weakest link really determines how high we go, not the strongest link. And so one of the reasons why you haven't had the similar kind of impact you've had in the UK here as we've had here is, listen, government employs less than 20% of the population. Government doesn't employ much in this country. So everybody's their own, you know what I mean, their own business, their own supplier, their own power supplier, their water supplier. And so even if government and organizations were retrenching, the masses were already you know what I mean? I'll get phone calls from my electrician or my bricklayer saying, Pastor, nobody has called me for a job for the last 3 days. Don't you have anything I can do? You know what I mean? Or my electrician or something like that. But when people started pulling back on the lockdown, they all just went back to their businesses. So the circumstances are kind of different. Your government employs quite a large number of people, you know, and so when your organization's there, employ a large number of people. But here, people are mostly just running their own businesses. So we don't feel it that way. I don't know if you get my point here. But the challenge is, COVID didn't change our behavior. Those who were wicked before COVID were wicked. I mean, those who were selfish were selfish. And so while COVID was going on, there's a guy I know, I had an accountant who left me 2 months before, January, to go work for a man because he was offering better pay. And I have a policy where my staff salaries come first. And that's nothing but just the culture of how I was brought up. You know, my mom and everywhere I've worked, my bosses have always said salaries of staff. So I've grown up with that kind of culture. He went to another organization that was offering more. And in the middle of the COVID-19, the man said, sorry, I'm going to pay myself first. And if there's anything left, I'll pay you. And the guy promptly resigned and came running back to me that, you know, he wanted his job back. And I said, unfortunately, because of the COVID, I can't employ anybody right now. But the point I'm trying to make is, human nature is human nature. Those who are wicked right now. Those who are generous are generous. Those who are kind are kind. The COVID didn't really do that much. It just brought out the best or the worst in us. And so I feel, you know, basically, look, let me put it this way. Who are you when nobody's looking? Who are you when all the chips are down? I have a studio in my office, which I built 3 years ago. And I tried to experiment with different backgrounds and finally came up with a black background, which I put at the back. And so my first broadcast, I'm wearing a black sweater like I am now. Yes, I'm wearing a sweater in Ibadan. You guys understand why I wear a sweater in your church when I come. So anyway, so I'm wearing a black sweater and a black t-shirt and a black jacket, and I'm sitting in a black studio. And my guys call me up and say, what kind of person are you? Why are you wearing black on the black background? Please be more selective about your clothes. And I said to them, that's one thing I'm not going to do. When you become so conscious of the camera, you lose the sense of who you are. I'm not going to get up in the morning and get dressed because of what I'm going to show on the camera. I'm going to dress the way I would normally dress. If I happen to get on the camera, too bad. And if it's all black, too bad. Because I had to be conscious of what had happened to my colleagues, who a camera makes you behave differently. You know what I mean? You act as a kind person. What is happening to Ellen DeGeneres? I know people don't listen to things like that. You know, everybody's saying she's a wicked, nasty person. You know, they're all talking about people's behaviors and character. But the point I'm trying to make is, come on, be yourself. In crisis, outside crisis, in the middle of it, just be yourself. Stay faithful to who you are. Don't play to a camera. Don't play to your Facebook page. Don't play to your Instagram post. Don't even play in church. If you're somebody who doesn't like smiling, don't smile. I never liked dancing. So when in my church, my choir, I used to think something was wrong with them because I would not dance when they're singing. But what they forgot was that when I was an unbeliever, my favorite song was blues. So I would wait and find a girl I could dance blues with. So it just became a second nature with me that I just would get into the, so I always like slow songs and I prefer those than dancing songs. So, you know, and they used to feel so uncomfortable that I would even not lead worship. But I said, but you're not worshiping me. What difference does it make if I want to it or not? You know, it makes no difference. The worship is to God. So please, just do whatever you think is right, do it. Leave me alone. Because some days I'll dance, especially if I got a 1 million, 2 million, 3 million naira contract or offering. I'll probably dance. You know, but things like that. So I'm just saying, but you get my point, though. So let me stop there.
Thank you. Thank you for being so real, Pastor Francis. That's why I am very conscious of time. Please, I don't want people asking questions now when we're rounding up. We have 15 minutes. It's just an hour. Lockdown, but not knocked down. Please ask your questions, and let's do that quickly. Whatever question is it. Okay, I did ask, maybe somebody doesn't have any question yet. Someone just graduated now into a pandemic.
Yeah.
You know, what will you tell such people?
Well, truthfully, it's this famous, is the glass half empty or the glass half full theory that I would look at. At least you're conscious of what is happening. You know exactly what's happening around the world. The world is not changing. The world has changed. So first thing you got to look is the glass is not, it's either the glass is, if you look at the glass as being half empty, it means you're going to see less opportunity. Or if you look at the glass as full, then you're going to be seeing opportunities. But if you look at it as half empty, you're going to be saying, oh, there's going to be challenges in jobs. Guys, right now, the average Nigerian student who doesn't know anything about it, do you know there was I had the privilege of interviewing the Lagos State Commissioner of Education on one of our Sunday services, and she said she went around Lagos trying to see how they could help schools and reach them, and they decided they were going to use radio because that was the cheapest way, and maybe television on the long run. And she said they got to some places in Lagos, 2020, that they had never seen a television and had never seen a radio in Lagos in 2020. That's the person that's going to compete with a graduate from China. Because as things are going, a lot of the things we're going to be doing, will be remote. But let me turn it upside down in a way that I think might help young people. The biggest factory in the world was Ford Motor Company. It used to be, it was about 1 kilometer long. Would you believe that? 1 kilometer long. Steel came in at one end and cars came out at the other. Now, what most people don't understand is that companies like Ford Motor Company came to existence the way they are. Ford, all these big companies you're looking at, corporate companies came into being and owning large real estates and buildings and 1 kilometer strong property because they had to put everybody under one roof. The accountants had to be there. The welders had to be there. The catering had to be there, the transportation had to be there, the audit had to be all under one building. Because there was no technology like we have today, where I can work remotely. I can do things from different parts of the world and still send it to you. So people had to be under one roof. And so these were people who were meant to be entrepreneurs in their own right. And that's why even in your country, you have people called baker, because their whole family were bakers. Or you have a farmer, they were farmers. And you know what I mean? Smiths, they were blacksmiths. They were professionals. But when corporate development, industrial age came, they had to put everybody under one roof. Now, in the last few years, because of technology, we're able to work remotely. I had the privilege of going to Boeing to visit with them, and they have this tour that takes about 3.5 to 4 hours. It's beautiful. If you're ever in Seattle, I want to recommend it. You're able to see the planes under construction. But what was fascinating to me was there was only one part of the plane that was made in Seattle. The rest were brought in from different countries, and they will assemble them and they will fit to the micro-millimeter, and the aircraft will work. That was fascinating to me. So what's happening right now is, if you look at it, we are not going to have big corporations again, the way they operate, you know. We're going to have more entrepreneurs growing up, being specialists in their field and contributing. And so anybody coming out right now, you have to arm yourself, not with a mindset of a job. Of course, you will start with a job if you can, but you have to arm yourself with acquiring the skills that the world needs at this particular time. But even that is a temporary need, because in the next 4 or 5 years, the effect of COVID will go off, and a new set of needs will appear. I'm not saying we'll still be feeling the effects of the COVID, but I mean, it will affect the way we all relate and how we do things. When the vaccines come, we're already beginning to see indications of that. Russia has already said their vaccines are only valid for 2 years. So that gives you an idea of what might happen. It might be continuous vaccination. You know what I mean? Every 2 years, or somebody will develop a 5-year one. I don't know. I'm just speculating here. But the point I'm trying to make is, study people like Paul. There's a man called Paul Zane-Pilzer. Read books like, there's this film, Adam Smith's. Adam Smith's book is a bit difficult to understand in today's language, but watch videos, listen to other people's commentary about it. It will give you an idea of how the economy is. There's a man called Paul Zane-Pilzer, I just called his name. Everybody was predicting a U-curve, very gradual V-curve for recovery. And this was in March. He said, no, it's going to be a V-curve, and it's going to be very sharp. We're going to come back. Jobs are going to come back quickly. And they said, why? He said, because we're not relearning things. We already know how to run businesses. We already know how to build industry. We know how to do construction. So we're not starting from scratch. It's not like the World War, where we have to start from scratch and build these industries again. It's a lockdown. And that eventually we're just going to come back better, faster, and more efficiently. So for me, that's because there are many naysayers, and there are many, even they're predicting gloom and doom for us here in Africa and in Nigeria. But I also believe it's going to be our greatest opportunity to get ourselves weeded off a lot of our rubbish and zero in on. If you know the way people are going into farming now, both at home and whatever, you'll see there's a difference. Because people have seen at the end of the day, what really mattered during the lockdown was food. You know, food was primary, you know, that was all we were looking for. How do we eat? How do we get a roof over our heads? How do we get water to drink? So you find out that people are beginning to think, wait a minute, I was wrong to have left farming. So young people who we couldn't even convince to go into farming are beginning to see that, oh, wait a minute. And it's not farming as go to the farm, but be part of the value chain. You know what I mean? And see what you can contribute to it. So for me, the world has changed, and this is going to be one of those opportunities where you need to look at and say, look, this is where the world is going. We're going to be specialists in our own field. What do I have a real drive for? What are the opportunities in that industry? And don't do something you're going to hate. Don't do something just because you want money. Do something You know, I'm teaching this tomorrow in my church. There's a difference between your job and your work. Your job is what you are paid to do. Your work is what you were born to do. And I'll close with this example. There's a place where, you know, you can only do so much with your job, but you can do a lot more with your work. There's this gentleman called Hank Rowan. You can Google him. And there's another one, I can't remember his name now. I can't remember his name. He was the first person to put containers on ships because he used to spend a week at the port trying to get his goods offloaded and loaded into his van. They will have to wait until the whole ship was brought out before they put it on before they select what is for him, before they put it, he will spend a week, his trucks will spend a week at the port. He came up with this idea that let's use containers so that once they arrive, most of you think containers, just came out from the moon. No, somebody sat down and sacrificed his entire investment. And he was the first person to build containers. He was the first person to ship containers. He was the first person. They laughed at him in Europe. They laughed at him in Asia. They laughed at him in America. But today, he's the primary guy. He changed the world. And that's why we can get quick deliveries and quick things. He's affected the world. So this other guy called Hank Rowan decided to spend $100 million, unheard of, financing engineering in a very low-kiddat school in America. Everybody else was given to Harvard and all these countries, all these big companies. He said, no, I want to help. He says, one of the reasons why Britain has stayed on the cutting edge of development in spite of it shrinking as a country and shrinking as an economy is simply because if you go back to the 60s and 50s and 50s, they had the largest number of engineers, a larger number of skilled tools, craftsmen. Britain leads the world in craftsmen. But guess what? China has taken over. There are more craftsmen in one single town in China than in the whole of America and in the whole of Great Britain. So that should tell you something about where you need to go. I'm going to stop. Thank you.
Thank you very much for pouring out. Let me see, we only have 5 more minutes. Anybody has any burning question quickly that we can take in 5 minutes before we release Pastor Francis? So if you do, unmute your mic and speak up quickly and make it brief.
I have a question very briefly, even though, Mike, thank you so much, sir, for everything you said. I really learned a lot. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
We can hear you.
My question, I can hear you. When the pandemic started, you mentioned it while you were speaking. A lot of the church, a lot of people were predicting different things. People were calling it God's judgment. People were calling it all different things. And if you go to study the word if you study the life of Daniel, he understood the word. He read and understood what is happening, no matter what people have said about it. Now, what do you think? Scripturally, not really what you think, but what do you think the church should be doing at this time? Do you think what is the church meant to be doing at this time? Are we going to just sit back and think is God's judgment, or is God giving us an opportunity to explore more and preach the gospel more?
Well, if you were here at the beginning, I tried to say to people that first and foremost, who is the church? That's the first thing we need to define. Secondly, what I tried to say in the beginning was we're not God, because this didn't take God by surprise. We were supposed to be doing certain things which were not supposed to be affected by this COVID. I don't know if you get the point I'm trying to make.
Yes, sir.
It's as if we lost our direction. You know what I mean? We were so focused on buildings and this and giving prophecies and never talking about bad things happening, never having to deal with pain and suffering, and never having to get to a place where, have you seen a pastor doing healing lines since? Has anybody, have you seen any pastor who has laid hands on anybody since the COVID started? You know, so, you know, we just got ourselves into this world. We are the only organization that exists for its non-members. It wasn't about us. Pastors will sit down and say, how are we going to do this? There will be no more tithe coming in. And I'll be looking at them and I'll be like, something's wrong with us. That's not why we existed, not to collect tithe. If we impact the world we're supposed to impact, the way we're supposed to impact it, it will naturally, God knows how to provide for his own. You understand what I mean? So we kind of just got things upside down. So I just think we're actually going back to the foundation we should have been in the first place. You understand what I'm saying? Because think about it. The church went through several, they were persecuted, they were killed, they were thrown to the lions. You know what I mean? Yet they survived. You know what I mean? Yes. What were they doing when they were going to be thrown to the lions? So it's almost as if we kind of lost our way. You know what I mean? And believe me, it's not a church per se. It's not a denomination that lost its way. And then look, let me say this to you. And this is going to be very confusing, so forgive me. People keep waiting for the church to mature. This is the problem. Today, somebody just got born again. He's a baby in church. Today, somebody died. Or today, somebody became an old man in church. Or today, somebody became a young man. Or today, somebody became a little child. So the church is a living, moving organism. It will never get to a place where it's going to be matured, where we're all going to know what to do and do it rightly. No. Each person, as you develop, do what God has called you to do. That's what the church is. So if I'm a baby, I don't have responsibility. You get the point I'm making. People feed me, they give me milk, they keep me going, I get strong. You know what I mean? I graduate from school, I start to work. And now it's demanded of me to pay tax and contribute to society and help and build my community. You see what I mean? So it's not about church, you know, matured, ready. No, it's individuals learning and manifesting. The Bible says that the whole world lies in travail, groaning, complaining, screaming, shouting, feeling the pressure of life, including COVID-19. What are they doing? They're waiting for the manifestation of the sons of God. Who are the sons of God? As many as are led by the Spirit, they are the sons of God. You see what I mean? He's not waiting for an organization. They're not waiting for Liverpool Love Assembly. They're not waiting for that. They're not waiting for Redeem. They're not waiting for my church. They're waiting for you to manifest as a son. You understand what I mean? They're not waiting for an organization. Everybody keeps waiting for an organization. No, that organization doesn't exist because the natural thing about any organization is to be selfish first. When tithes come, pastor, don't you first look after salary and overheads? Won't you look after your staff salaries and pay the overheads of the church and pay for the building before you start thinking of anybody outside? But imagine if I owned the radio station and that radio station has values, has things. There was a song that was done in Sister Act. I can't remember the name of the song. It was downloaded almost 46 million times during the COVID-19. A Christian song. 46 million. People just wanted to hear that song. It is well with my soul or something like that. I don't know if you get my point. People they're just waiting for us. Because salt has a limit. You can only salt the rice you are put on. You can pour salt in your rice in Liverpool. It won't get to my rice here in Ibadan. The rice here in Ibadan has to be salted by somebody here in Ibadan. So it's still an individual thing. The job of a pastor is to equip the saints to go and do the work of the ministry. And the work of the ministry is not limited. It's not church. Church is separate. It's apostles in the marketplace, prophets in the marketplace, teachers, business people, all sorts of doctors with unique breakthrough ideas. We have to believe God for a vaccine and a cure. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes. Our time is up. Thank you, everybody. I think, Pastor Francis, you've hit it there. One of the things I personally, I recall telling people at the start of the pandemic, look, everybody go to your tent and go and look after yourself. You hit something here now. Waiting for an organization is not the issue here. The world is waiting for you. The world is waiting for me to manifest. This is our time of manifestation. And if God calls us light, light shines when it is dark. So I pray that some of the things shared by Pastor Francis and some of the things we've picked up along the way tonight will help us in the lockdown so that we are not knocked down. So thank you, everybody. I promise it's going to be an hour and it's already 4 minutes past. So thank you, Pastor Francis.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
I will definitely get back to you. I don't know if you are free immediately after this so I can just have a quick chat with you.
Yeah, is Noah around?
Yes, he is. Let me. So maybe we stay on while everybody goes off so you can have a chat with Noah. Yeah.
All right.
So thank you, everybody.